Okay, good to go.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. And good welcome to this morning's meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is now 9 a.m. Would you please take attendance?
Yes, good morning. Adrian Cochran. He has not joined us yet. Andrea Comer.
Present.
Ellen McKitterick.
Present.
John Scott will not be joining us today. Mike Soltis.
Present.
And Holly Williams.
Present.
Great, thank you. We have a quorum.
I'm sorry. Stephanie, did you look? Is there anyone in the waiting room?
There is no one in the waiting room.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I believe of the public that are with us this morning, but we'll just, state for the record, if does or choose to join us, then we thank them. And we're going to do of the February 24th, 2023 minutes and a call to approve.
Move to approve the February 24, 2023 minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you. And then Dave, provide us with an update of the budget review of spending to date.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. I will share the financials for the month of February. Okay.
We can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you for the verification. As always, Stephanie, I appreciate it. Okay, so for the month of February, the expenses of the authority were just over $752,000. The categories of expenses were the typical ones. Salaries and pension and benefits were $487,000. The contact center was almost $129,000. Licenses were over $97,000. That included our annual license for ForgeRock, which is one of the licenses we use for our contributions and registration database. And we had outreach expenses of over $22,000. We were better than budget by $431,000 for the month, and we continue to be better than budget by over $4.7 million year to date through February. Moving on from operations to bonds, we spent $122,000 of bond money this month, primarily on our website redesigning and replatforming that we're doing right now. We were ahead of budget by $103,000, and we are ahead of budget year to date by $3.8 million. There will be some more spending during the rest of the fiscal year. So in future financials, you may see a negative monthly variance, but the year-to-date variance will still be positive. We just thought we would be spending the money sooner than we did. In terms of the totality of bond expenditures, we still have just over $16 million allocated to us by the state. We spent $12.2 million, and so we have $3.8 million remaining for the authority to use. That's been allocated thus far. Moving on to our contribution activity for the month. Contributions came in were almost $834,000. That was under budget by $821,000, but that was more than offset by our positive variance of investment income for the month. We continue to earn a competitive rate. For the month of February, we were north of 4.5%. So we're pleased at the results there so far. The other main item in the contribution budget, as most of you are aware, are the benefits that are paid. We were at $23 million for the month. We are seeing a slight uptick there, especially even in the last few weeks in March. Actually, we've been seeing some weekly payments north of $6 million. So we are seeing that, and nice to see people using the benefits. In all, our net activity for the month was $22.5 million, better than budget by $15.3 million. The biggest driver of that continuing to be less benefits paid than we had budgeted for, and that's also the same year to date. Our year to date activity is $94.7 million, with a positive variance of over $101 million. And again, the biggest driver of that are the benefits being paid. The contribution fund balance as of the end of February was $477.9 million. So that's in a good place. Contribution revenue from inception is over $822 million, and benefits paid from inception are almost $290 million. I am pleased to report that during the month of March, we did go over $300 million. So we're very happy to reach that landmark at this point. Moving on to the balance sheet, no great changes there, over $500 million of assets. The biggest asset continues to be the short-term investment fund at $465 million. Something worthy of reporting, we do, as most of you know, we have an imprest account of $12 million, and that account is used to fund the benefits. Working with AFLAC, we were able to convert that account to an interest-bearing account. So as of March 1, we will be earning interest. Now, because it's an imprest account, the way that works is the money is deposited and then used for benefit payments. And then we reimburse the account for the benefit payments about a week later. As I'd mentioned before, benefit payments are running about $6 million a week. So the average balance in the imprest account at any time is about $6 million. The interest rate on that account will be at about 3.5%. Not as good as the short-term investment fund, but still pretty good. So on an annual basis, that'll be about another $250,000 a year. So we were very happy to be able to work with AFLAC so that the money that is in there is earning interest, because I think, as everybody is aware now, we're in a higher interest rate environment. It wasn't an issue when we were setting up the account and the interest rate was 0.1%, but now that we can earn 3.5%, that's some real money worth getting some interest for. So we want to thank AFLAC for being able to work with us and get that done. As far as where we think we're going to be at the end of the year, we believe that our net activity is going to be $6 million with total expenses of almost $14 million. That's compared to the budgeted expense we had at $17 million. So that's a $3 million positive variance. The biggest driver of that is staffing expense. We expected to have more positions filled by this time during the year. Hasn't happened yet, so that's why we're ahead. We also have some other expenses that at this point we don't think we're going to be using everything we've budgeted, so we've ratcheted them down as well. And the contribution budget, the contribution projection rather, also is ahead of budget. We expect to get about almost $430 million of contributions in. That is lower than what we budgeted, but we also expect to pay about $325 million of benefit payments out, and that's also lower than the budget. And that variance is larger than the contribution budget, as you can see. And the biggest driver of why we'll be We expect to be ahead of the contribution budget by over $129 million by June 30. That's where we are as of the month of February. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question,
Yes, Mike,
if I may.
of course.
Your mentioning of the impressed account is what prompts this.
Yes,
So there's a lot of turmoil going on in the banking industry these days.
yes, there is.
Do we have any exposure to any of that? Do we have money? I know most of our money is with the state, but do we, how comfortable should we be about where our money is?
We should be very comfortable because we're only investing in a short-term investment fund with the state, and they're not investing in anything risky. Aflac is investing in, I'll double check the investment vehicle, but it's very conservative. It's nothing, it's similar to the short-term investment fund. I mean, it's nothing aggressive because I do not, nor does anyone else at the authority want to put the principal at risk. So
we don't have money in a bank? No. Okay.
No,
That's
we're
what
not
most
separately
people-
investing any money in any bank.
in a bank.
I mean, we have money at Bank of America, but that's like our checking account and things like that. We're not invested in any bank,
Right.
if that's what you're asking.
Well, no, I'm actually asking, do we have a bank account at a bank?
Yes, we have money at Bank of America through the state, the contribution account, the money of the contributions initially goes into a bank account that's in trust with the state of Connecticut, and then the funds are put into the short-term investment fund. We also have money at Bank of America to pay our bills and things like that, but we really only transfer the money from the state to Bank of America as we need to pay the bills, with a certain amount readily on deposit at the bank, just to make sure we don't bounce any payments and things like that.
And Aflac has assured us that the bank that they use is not at all associated with any of the banks that either experience any difficulties or on any of the current watch lists.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
I don't see anything else. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. And we're going to move on now to review the draft budget for fiscal year 24. So Dave, if you could walk the committee through that.
Okay, so I know I sent a lot of information on the budget out this week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a presentation that's going to summarize where we are with the budget and hit the high points. And then we'll discuss where we are and what the committee has to do and things like that. So of course, if you have any questions along the way or you want to wait till the end, please feel free to ask me. But we'll make this as painless as possible, while also being thorough enough that you're good with the information being presented. Okay, having said that, let me open this up.
You can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Okay, here we go. Okay. So it's that time of year again. I always say time flies. And so we're going to be talking about our budget for the coming fiscal year. Now, the fiscal year is from July to June. So we will be talking about the period July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. Our budget, as you probably have gathered from the financial statements that are presented, is broken out into three sections. There's our operating budget, which covers the necessary expenses to operate the authority. There's also our bond budget, and that money is used for system builds and things of that nature. And then there's the contribution budget, which is how we budget for what's really the heart and soul of the authority, which is the contributions coming in and the benefit payments going out and all the necessary other expenditures related to that. We're going to start with the operating budget. We have budgeted revenue of over $20 million for the authority. The vast bulk of that is the administration fee that covers all the necessary expenses of the authority. There's also a smaller piece of that for fund recovery penalties. We are starting to issue and assess penalties as of May. So we've budgeted a very conservative number, just over $21,000 for that, as we don't really have any history yet to base the budget on. The expenses for the authority have been budgeted at $17.2 million. The significant categories for that are salaries, fringe benefits, and pension. We've budgeted for a total of 46 people by the end of the fiscal year. That includes 4 new positions, 2 in finance for fund recovery, an operations manager, and a paralegal specialist. We also have increases in there built in, wage increases that were approved during last year. And so all that has been approved by the state, working with the latest CBAC agreement. And so that was 2.5%. That's on July 1, 2023. And then on July 1, 2024 is the 3% salary adjustment there. So all that has been incorporated into our salary budget. Other operating expenses are our contact center with United Way. That's driven by our contract with them, so that's pretty straightforward. We've also built a price increase into that, as we expect that to happen, as it did this year. We also have some IT support of the contribution system. That number was actually budgeted at a lower amount than what we budgeted last year. I'll show you that in a second. Outreach and engagement, also a significant expenditure. We budgeted about $1 million for that. That's consistent with prior year budgets in order to get the message out there, not only to the people of the state of Connecticut to make them aware of the benefit program and how they can use it, but also as a reminder to employers of the state of Connecticut of their obligations to pay into the authority. There's always new employers that are popping up, so we want to make sure they get the message. We also have a budget for a grievance adjudication with our partners over at Department of Labor. And also a significant part of our budget is for licenses to run the software for our contribution system. So, like I said, that's about $17.3 million of expenses. These were the significant assumptions. I just actually walked through those as I was doing through the numbers, so I won't go through those again. The only other thing I'll mention is that our benefit rate continues to be at 90%. It was 23% for healthcare and 67% for the pension obligation. I think last year's budget was 25.65, but we're currently running at 23.67, but the total is still 90%. Other expenses were just based on historical run rates we've seen, along with an inflationary factor when appropriate, along with any other anticipated needs we see in the new year. Now, I know this page is busy, but I just want to walk you through it. So let's first start. What's the point of this page? So the point of this page is in the first column is the current budget we're proposing. And what I just wanted to do was show you how that compares to last year's budget, which is the second column, and also how it compares to our latest projection. Because our latest projection is where we think we are now, and last year's budget is what we proposed about a year ago. So for example, total revenue we budgeted was $20 million. That's consistent with last year's budget and actually with our latest projection. So there's really no great change there. As far as total expenses, all the way down at the bottom in the left-hand corner, I mentioned we had $17.3 million of expenses budgeted. That is $221,000 or 1.3% higher than last year's budget, which isn't bad, right? Now, what's the biggest driver of that increase? The biggest driver of that increase is our payroll and related benefits, because we've got more staff, we have wage increases. So that's about $733,000 of that. We also increased our printing and postage budget because we anticipate using that for our fund recovery efforts. We're going to use electronic medium as much as we can, but we don't have everybody's email address, for example, and some things we want to send out in writing via mail as well as email to make sure they're aware of their obligations. Software licenses is also going up somewhat. We're going to have additional licenses because we have private plan audit software now. We have additional needs for storage because we've been around for a few years now. We have fund recovery software, address verification software, more software licenses for Salesforce content, things like that. So those are the main drivers of why the software licenses is going up. Now, it's not all going up. Some of it's going down. For example, our actuarial expense is going down. At the time last year, we were sending out an RFP for our actuary, so we weren't quite sure where we were going to land. This year, we know how much the number is in the contract, and so we budgeted at a lower amount for the amount in that contract, and a little more in case we asked them to do additional work for us. The biggest decrease of all was in IT consulting, because we're not using as much outside consultants anymore to help us with the operations of our software. We have more IT staff now in-house that are doing that work, so we need to outsource it less. So all of that I just went through, which I know is quite a few lines, is why we're $220,000 in more than in expenses compared to last year's budget. Now, compared to our latest projection, our budget is $3.2 million higher. Our budgets are conservative. We certainly need to budget for things that we think are going to happen. Not all of it happens, or not all of it happens as soon as we think we will, but we want to be adequately budgeted for it. So for example, the biggest driver of why we're $3.2 million higher, again, is staffing. It's $2.4 million. It assumes that we'll be fully staffed and ready to go in July. Well, not fully staffed with the positions that we have open right now. And then we'll add other positions, the other 4 positions as we go along. Will that happen? Not sure. Historically, it hasn't always happened that way. But if it does, we want to make sure that we're budgeted for it. Also, grievance adjudication. Hello, yes?
Yeah, Dave, sorry. And you may have addressed this already. How many open positions have you at this time?
At this time, I'm not sure the exact number, but I think it's about I want to say it's about half a dozen positions, most of them IT positions. IT positions continue to be challenging for us to fill.
Yeah.
Any other?
There's one finance, the associate general counsel, and then there's sort of either, I think it's 3 open IT positions right now.
Is it 3? Okay, 3 and 1. Okay. And a legal, I think, is technically
So,
right.
yeah, so
And a
1
legal?
finance, 1 legal, and I believe 3 IT.
Okay. There we go.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Okay. Is that all right, Adrian? Anything else?
Thank you.
You're welcome, of course. Okay. So let's see, where was I left off? Oh, okay. So we discussed grievance adjudication. So printing and postage, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing fund recovery for the full fiscal year next year for the first time. So we wanted to make sure we had adequate printing and postage. Software and licenses, same reason, went over that. Contingency, we do have a contingency in the budget again this year for $250,000, just in case for the things that we don't know of that come up. So we don't necessarily have to go to the board and ask for additional funds. If we do use that contingency for something, we would of course let the finance committee and the board know what that amount was for. But we still wanted it to make sure it was in the budget, just to make sure we had an adequate budget. And again, IT consulting, we spent less than we expected, so we budgeted at a lower amount. And so again, I just wanted to give everybody here a sense of scope to compare the current budget for the coming fiscal year as compared to last year's budget and last year's projection. Let's move on to bonds. Bonds, we're budgeting $2.1 million of money this year. We think we'll be using the money for some portal enhancements, things like upgrading and restructuring the user experience. We've added some additional information in there, so we just want to make it easier for the user to read it. A private plan renewal administration. Those will be private plans, have to be renewed every 3 years. So we're going to need some software to automate that process. And then the employee contribution, some employee contribution system enhancements centered around customer account functionality, things like role management, payment method management, registration, views of current status, things of that nature. So that's what we expect to use the bond money for in the next year. Moving on to the contribution budget. So the biggest piece of the contribution budget is the money coming in, the payroll contributions. That estimate has been determined in tandem with our actuaries, and I'll touch more on that in a minute. But we've been working on them, and this is where they've come to determine how much in contributions that we're going to expect during the year. Fund recovery, we also expect some money to come in from our fund recovery efforts. Again, we budgeted that relatively conservatively. We're just not sure how much we're going to get in, as we haven't done it before, but that's our best estimate at this time. Investment income, $22 million. We budgeted that at a rate of 4%. That's less than what we're earning now. But we're in an interesting economic environment. So I know the rate keeps going up, but that I think is going to cool down. I've also read about some rumblings that they may bring the rate down eventually. Not sure where that's going to be. So we felt comfortable budgeting at 4%. We also consulted with the Office of the Treasurer to see where they were landing, and they actually landed at a rate north of 4%. And the Office of the Treasurer is certainly, they're not, they're pretty conservative too. But we just felt a rate of 4% was comfortable for where we were. Because the interest rate has not been steady lately, as a lot of you know. So we just wanted to put something in there, realistic yet conservative. Moving on to our expenses, we have budgeted our benefit payments to be $400 million. That's also worked in tandem with our actuaries. That's also a conservative estimate on the high side. We do expect an uptick from the prior year. And again, I'm going to show you something in a few minutes on how we compare to prior year numbers to give you a sense of scope on how we got that number. The next line, claims and benefit expenses, that's at $25 million. That's consistent with last year. Our run rate for that has been somewhat lower than that, but we just, again, there's always a possibility that there may be additional work that AFLAC would do for us if we asked them to do it for us. So we want to make sure we have a budget in there for that. The administrative fee is $20 million. That is consistent with the operation budget we saw earlier. It had better be, quite frankly. So those numbers need to agree. And then the last item is the bond repayment at $2.2 million. That we are currently talking with the office, with OPM, the Office of Policy Management, to finalize the terms of the repayments of our bonds. And so we should have that done in the next few months. I actually have a meeting with them later today. So based on preliminary discussions with them, we've budgeted this at 4% and at semi-annual interest for 10 years. We don't think the payment terms will be any worse than that. But like I mentioned, we hope to finalize this soon and get on a repayment schedule and get that immortalized. Oh, and the amount of the repayment is based on a principal amount of the $60 million that we have had allocated to the authority so far. If we did borrow more money, then that would be part of the bond repayment as well. These are the assumptions behind it. I just actually walked through these as I was going through the numbers. So again, I won't go through all that, but it's there in writing. And oh, by the way, yes, I will be sending this presentation to all the members of the committee after this meeting, so you have a chance to look at it and review. Again, I just want to do a high-level comparison for you of the budget compared to last year's budget and the projection. Again, to give you a sense of scope of where some of these numbers come from. For example, the contribution budget is at $437.5 million. We did taper that down somewhat from last year's budget because we saw the contributions coming in were lower than what we had budgeted at that time. We have another year of experience to draw from. And so based on that experience, we did taper it down. It is somewhat higher than where we expect this where we expect the projected contributions to be, because we think there'll be higher contributions. That's what the actuaries are telling us. They expect to be wage increases and things of that nature. So that's why it's higher. Investment income, again, the biggest driver of that is the higher interest rate. Last year, we budgeted at 0.1%, if you can believe it, because that's what we were earning at the time. And now we're north of 4%. So we've budgeted this, as I mentioned, at 4%. And this projection shows how much interest we think we're going to get at the end of the year. And that's based anywhere between what we were earning at the beginning year of 0.1% to 4% now. And so when you add those two items together, those are the biggest drivers of the variance in the total revenue, which was $460 million for the budget. Now, as far as total expenses for the contribution budget, it's 447 million compared to 496 million last year. So that's a $49 million decrease in expenses. The biggest driver of that is benefit payments. And why are they lower? Last year, when we budgeted benefit payments, I think we had just started making benefit payments when we were working on the budget. We didn't have any actual history. Our actuaries have taken that history into account, and so they've estimated $400 million based on their latest estimates. So that's less than what we had estimated last year. Like I said, because our actual history of year of benefit payments is coming in less than what we expected, so we tapered it down. It is higher than what we expect this year's projection to be of over $325 million. Again, we are seeing an uptick in the last few weeks. So if that continues to run forward, then there will be higher benefit payments. The beginning of last year, the benefit payments started off relatively low, and then they picked up. So based on all that information, that's how we came up at $400 million. Again, a conservative estimate. We don't want to be caught short in the budget, but that's a sense of, again, just to give you a sense of scope of how we came up with these numbers. Okay. So now that we've run through that, what does the committee have to do? So the committee has 28 days, at least 28 days to review the budget, and that's called the comment period. The next scheduled Finance and Audit Committee meeting is on April 28th. That's actually more than 28 days. So you'll have the opportunity to review the budget and ask me or Erin or anybody, well, not anybody else, but ask Erin or myself any questions you have regarding the budget, or you could wait until the next Finance Committee meeting if you're more comfortable with that. If there's any takeaways today, or anything that the authority itself finds that's worth updating the budget for, which has happened in prior years, we get some updated information, and so we incorporate that into the budget. We let you know what those changes are at the next budget meeting. So if the budget is going to be revised, we would send that to you again the Monday before the next meeting, give you an opportunity to look at it. We'll discuss the meeting next month on Friday, the 28th, finalize it at that time. And then a few weeks later, we'll review it with the board and ask for their vote to approve on May 11th. If the board feels they need more time or they have questions or anything like that, the plan of operations says the budget should be approved by May 31st. So we could ask the board for a special meeting by May 31st, or if the board felt so, they could vote to go past May 31st and vote on the budget on June 8th. Typically, that doesn't happen. Typically, we present the budget at the first meeting. We answer any questions, there's discussions, and then they vote for it in May. So that's the anticipation. So that's the budget and the budget process. I know that was quite a bit of information. I thank you for sticking with it. Again, just wanted to make sure you had enough information to know what's in the budget. So if anybody has any questions at this time, I'm more than happy to go over anything in the budget with you.
I just want to correct the record to respond to Adrian's question more precisely. We have 3 vacancies that we're actively recruiting to fill right now. And the budget includes 5 additional vacancies, sort of with the expectation that they would be filled by July, but we haven't started any recruitment efforts for those 5.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you, Aaron.
Actually, thank you, Locke. He was the one who's
Hmm.
frantically getting me that information in the background.
Actually, thank you for reminding me about that. I do want to thank Locke Foe, our assistant controller, who was very instrumental in the budget process, putting the schedules together, being another set of eyes, meeting with all the department heads, getting their input and everything like that. Locke is very dedicated. He's technically supposed to be off today, but I know he couldn't resist attending the budget meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee. So I do want to thank him for attending today and helping out as always. Thank you, Locke. Okay. Anybody have any questions regarding the budget?
Can I ask a couple questions?
Of course you can, Mike.
And these are just general, number one, I think your slide presentation with the comparisons is very helpful.
Oh,
So,
good. Thank you. I'm glad you got, I'm glad you got a lot out of that. Very good.
I'm just curious, again, there's all kinds of prognosticators out there about the economy, but some component of them project a recession, whether it's a small recession, a large recession, who knows? But do you know, I mean, to what extent our actuaries have taken that into account when projecting our contributions? Because while there may be increases, there's a lot of layoffs going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're not projecting any kind of huge recession. I think they always include that as a possibility in their numbers, that, you know, it's not all going to be rosy. And so they do incorporate that in there. I could certainly go back to them and just reiterate that it's a concern. There's more people talking about that as the days go on, and does that need to be more of a factor in our budget? I mean, I'll tell you that the net effect of the contribution budget is a plus this year. I mean, it's ahead by about $12 million. So if we do need to ratchet the contribution budget down in the interest of conservatism, just to make, you know, to incorporate that factor in there, I think we could certainly do that and still be comfortable where the contribution budget lands.
Yeah.
But I'll go back and talk to them about that for sure.
Right. One thing that I do know from previous conversations is where you have lower employment, you do have lower contributions potentially, but that also affects the eligibility, because although you can continue to be eligible for 12 weeks after employment, longer term unemployment does render somebody ineligible for benefits.
Right.
There's a compensating factor there.
Okay.
So so there is that 12-week window, but eventually both would go down.
Right.
So
my other kind of macro question
yes, sir.
is, so the other economic factor we've all been dealing with in our lives and businesses is inflation, right?
Yes.
So to what extent, putting aside the wage increases, which are negotiated,
Correct.
I mean, to what extent are our increased costs due to inflation?
We did put an inflationary factor in certain expenses. It wasn't all expenses, so I can't tell you like take 5% of all the expenses and that's the inflationary factor. Locke and I can go back and we could determine that number for you, how much it was. But for certain of the categories, we did build in a 5% inflationary factor, because we know costs are going to go up. Like I mentioned, like our contact center expense, we put in 5% for that, because every year we sign a new contract with them, and I think last year the amount was 3%. So it may be 3% this year, maybe 5%. They may ask. I know Some of our other operating expenses, some conferences and travel and supplies and other things like that. We put in a factor in there because like you, I think actually it was Locke who said to me, he's like, we just know some of this stuff is going to go up, and
Right,
you can't turn a blind eye to it and hope for the best, because that's not really a good budgeting tactic. So
right.
we can go back and look at the lines, and I can get I could send you a dollar amount of how much we built in there for inflation, if you'd like.
Well, I'm just kind of more curious on a macro-ish scale rather than a line by line issue. So I don't really need that.
Okay, we'll take a look at it, see which lines we built in, and we'll let you know in total how much, in terms of dollar amount, how much we built in for inflation. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. Okay, sure.
And my last question, and this requires, I guess, Erin primarily to look into her crystal ball. Is there anything on the legislative front that might affect our operations next year? Any talk about increasing the benefit due to inflation? Anything that should be on our landscape, on our radar?
So there are two bills that we're watching very closely that could impact our operations. The first is Senate Bill 1179, which does three things, two of which could impact our benefits. The first is that it actually provides a definition for municipality. It's our statute says that employees of municipalities don't participate, but neither CTPL nor CTFMLA has ever defined municipality. So there's an effort to define it, and it would be a more narrow definition than the one we've adopted by policy, which means there would be more people who could participate in the program. So more people providing providing contributions, and more people eligible for benefits if that goes through. And then the second part of that bill would create an opportunity for employees of the tribal nations and their enterprises to participate in the program. It's not mandatory. It'd be just a mechanism for opting in along the same lines as sole proprietors. Again, relatively small proportion of workers affected by that compared to the overall size of the Connecticut workforce. And with that opt-in provision, because they connect it to the sole prop provision, it also includes a 3-month contribution period before they could apply for benefits. So potential changes, but we really don't think it's going to have a huge impact, but we have been talking to the actuaries to make them aware of it. The third thing 1179 does is clarify under what circumstances employer-sponsored short-term disability plans can reduce their benefits. So that doesn't affect our operations at all. It just is an attempt to clear up that issue. The other bill that we're watching that could have an impact on us is Senate Bill 1223. That would put all quasi-public agencies contracting under the authority or in oversight of the State Contracting Standards Board. The fiscal impact of that operation is indeterminate, I think is the phrase that OFA would say. Holly, tell me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct.
The concern there is the State Contracting Standards Board authority is vast. They would have the right to assert any contracting authority that we have over our own contracts. In particular, they have the ability to require us or any quasi to go to them if they considered any of our contracts to be a privatization contract and delay or impose restrictions on that. It's something that state agencies have been dealing with since I think 2007, around that time. but quasis have always been exempted. It would not be a good thing for us. It's something that they've been trying to do for a few years, and we've been opposing because it really would interfere with our operations. So we're continuing to talk to the legislature to say, if your concern is transparency, okay, we're pretty darn transparent, but what else can we do? But you created us as a quasi for a reason, and so imposing these restrictions and giving this outside entity this overarching authority over our operations is a really bad idea. Again, the fiscal impact of that is indeterminate, but it's something that we're really watching closely and trying to make sure it doesn't go forward, because the proponents say they just want transparency, but the solution they're offering is, it's taking a wrecking ball to a gnat, honestly. So we're trying to get the language more proportionate to the need. So those are the two we're watching.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Anyone else have any questions on the budget? Okay, well,
I just want to, let me just check that. Okay. It's a credit to your summation, I would say, Dave, that we don't have any more substantive questions.
okay, well, you have a month in case you think of anything afterwards. So just email me directly. Please don't copy any other committee members because we don't want a impromptu committee meeting occurring without giving the notice first. So just email me directly and I'll answer your question, and we'll let the committee know about it if it rises to that level of disclosure.
Thank you. So without any further questions, then we'll move on to old business. Is there any old business that anybody would like to discuss? I don't see any new business? No. All right, so may I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. It's 9:53. I wish you all a lovely weekend. Thank you for your time this morning, staff. We appreciate it. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.